The following is a special video presentation of the Hennepin County Library.
Good morning, and welcome to a discussion with Olga Silverstein. Olga is the author of a book called The Courage to Raise Good Men. Olga, a son is a son till he takes a wife. A daughter is a daughter the rest of her life.
Right.
Your book has to do with changing this conventional wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
Why?
Well, I think in several reasons. Let me tell you a story. My husband is one of two sons. When his mother became ill in her old age and was dying, he said to me once, very sort of despairingly hard, he said, "Oh God, how I wish I had a sister." The implication being that if we had had a sister, that woman would be taking care of Mother now. And I don't know how to do it. I feel for her, I have to feel, but I can't really relate. She doesn't really want me. She's longing. And in fact, my mother-in-law asked at the last for her own sister. She said, actually almost her last words, "I need a sister." And we called her sister in Chicago, who came in and sat with her. But her two sons were too distant, too separated from her, in a way lost to her. And it was very sad. It was very sad.
How does that occur? What in our lives, our approach to living?
Well, everything in the culture tells women, that men belong to the outside world, that your sons are not your own, that little ditty, a son is a son till he gets him away, that you shouldn't be too close to him, that you have to find a way to set him free, as though love is a bind, not just a bond. Mm-hmm. That if you show too much love, too much caring, too much attachment, he will never be a real, in quotes, man. Mm-hmm. And that he will never be able to leave you, that somehow. So that there is very early in this culture, particularly, in the Anglo culture particularly, a very early cutoff from the mother.
Now, it seems, however, in conventional psychology, in your book, you reference, of course, a number of studies, but you also reference a lot of popular literature.
Right.
And it seems that this approach is entirely contrary to what everybody is preaching, everybody is talking about. How did you start down this path? Because you must not have been trained this way.
Oh, I was definitely not trained this way. I was trained as a Freudian, actually. Yeah. I started down this path, I guess, out of my own experience with my own son, but largely out of my clinical practice, in which I have seen many men, starting from little men to husbands, fathers, and old and really retired old men, who find that their whole definition of themselves was so based on work, so work-oriented, achievement-oriented, that when they retire, they die. They literally dry up and die.
Well, here we are in the spring of '94, and your book has just come out, and I am thinking of all of the other writings on redefining masculinity, redefining the male, the role model male, and then and you come along and sort of blow all of this out of the water. Aren't your colleagues a little upset about this, or how is your book being received in professional circles?
That's a very interesting question, because in my particular field, which is family therapy, it's not such a big field, and it's a reasonably newcomer in the mental health field, of 40, 45 years old. So that the original sort of what we call the big boys, the original theoreticians in the field, the psychiatrists, some of them are still alive. And so I'd say that in those circles, it is not well received. It's very threatening, and because those notions that women can contaminate their boys with their femininity are very rigidly held. There are whole theoretical models that how mother-son relationship is, so that in treatment you separate the mother from the son if they're too close. If the boy is presenting problems, and there is one particular theoretical formulation and theoretician who's very well known in the field, and I'm not going to mention his name, but if a mother and a son are sitting together, as you and I are in a therapy session, and like the father would be sitting here, he'll separate them. He'll put the father
in between.
In between.
Interesting. Do you, in defining this new, perhaps role or definition of man, of the masculine, what can be achieved or what can be gained by that? Is it a corrective device that you're using, or is it a?
I think it's a dramatic change. It's more than a corrective device. I would hope that it would mean a redefinition in terms of what it means to be a man in this world that we live in, because the current definition, which depends so much on achievement, prove of masculinity. A man spends his life proving that he's male in one way or another. And so I would hope that it would be possible to just be a human being, and that the definition, that sort of gender divide, would dissolve in time, and that we would all try to be competent and caring people.
Well, I've read that there are, and not so much in your book, although you do refer to this, that I've read that in each of us there is a masculine and a feminine set of qualities.
See, there I'm going to, again, that the language in which we describe things sets up the division to begin with. Even though we admit that both of those qualities are in us, once we say that these are the masculine qualities, but we also have feminine qualities, you've divided people into two categories, feminine and masculine. And I'm saying we all have the ability to be competent, achievement-oriented, strong people. We also have the capacity to be warm, connected, relational, intimate, and those are not feminine qualities.
Well, certainly in the late 20th century, and the role of women, mothers, changing in the workplace, for instance, and we are defining competencies that perhaps in earlier times we didn't need to define among women. Are there competencies that need to be defined among men? You're saying these are now a different set.
What I'm saying is that it's been okay for women to be more like men. What is defined more like men? That is, to be a daddy's girl is a wonderful thing. To be a mommy's boy is a disgrace, right? And the reason for that is fairly clear. It's okay for women to be more like men because that has more status. Whatever is male is perforce by definition is better. And so to have more what we call feminine qualities, if I want you to have them, I mean, you might deny that you want them. They're a step down.
They can be extremely useful, though, in terms of coping with a...
I'd say they're necessary to live in the world, not that they're fairly useful. And that we've gotten into a place in the world in which the denial of those traits, and I don't want to call them feminine, but the tenderness and the caring and the empathic quality that all men are capable of, to deny them in yourself is to end up with nothing but the loneliness, the alienation, the depression, and the aggression, which men are allowed, the anger and the depression. A 16-year-old boy said to me once, I said to him, "What do you do when you feel like crying?" And he just looked at me, he said, "I hit somebody."
It's a that's
I mean, even now, telling the story, I get goosebumps.
yeah, it's a familiar response, and it's probably one that has led to a lot of the problems that we're in.
Absolutely.
In your book, you follow chronologically. I'm the
Mm-hmm.
father of a 6-year-old boy and
Right.
a 14-year-old boy, and 2 daughters in between. How do you start? Where do you start?
Well, that was the big question. How to start, where to start. I tend to start from the top because I've seen so many couples, so that, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But then, I guess you start a story, or I think of it as you tell the story of what is, and then build to the changes you would like to see. As a therapist,
Mm-hmm.
I have a kind of historical take on life, you know. So if I want to know you, I want to know about your relationship to your mother, for instance,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
Mm-hmm.
So that relationship starts at birth, even before birth. I mean, it's an amazing thing, you know, that happens, that now with amniocentesis, when you know everybody knows you're going to have a little girl, people, even strangers, and say to you, oh, do you know what it is? You say, yes, it's going to be a little, oh, they go and they, oh. If you say, yes, I'm going to have a boy, they go, bully for you.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
But not that, you know. I remember very well that when my son was brought to me in the hospital, and he was screaming, red-faced, he was screaming thing, and the nurse said, oh God, this guy is powerful. When he wants something, he wants it. Feed him. And I would, oh, give it, you know, he's strong, he's sturdy. When my next child, who was a girl, was brought to me, same screaming, same red face, same fist. She said, oh, sweetie, she's hungry, she's upset.
Well, it goes even further beyond just the simple environment of the close bond. I remember our 14-year-old, when he was
Mm-hmm.
born, the decision on what color to paint the room. And that was, we didn't have, or at least it wasn't as popular then, or Kitty, my wife, was much younger, so we didn't have amniocentesis. We didn't know if it was going to be male or female. And due to that sort of cultural pressure, we painted the room peach, so it would be neither pink nor blue. You know, I mean,
I see, it's sort of,
right.
you know, yellow is, you know,
Yeah.
is a popular choice for those people who don't know what is.
Is this mostly a Western construct, or do we find this in many cultures?
Oh, I think the raising of, or the cult of masculinity, it's like, think of it as that, permeates the world as we know
Yeah.
it. And that in more primitive cultures, or less, let's say, less developed countries, it may even be culturally more necessary for men to have those qualities that we call masculine, culturally necessary, because they do need to fight more hand to hand. They need the upper body strength. That is a major difference in the genders. Women need to be more available to protect the young, and so on, so that it's functional in certain societies. Even today, it's more functional. It's not functional, it's dysfunctional in our mechanized age.
Mm-hmm. So the time is right, or maybe overright.
That we've got to make that
that
change.
change.
We haven't made the change. We've made so many changes, but we haven't made that big cultural shift.
Yeah. Your approach to to the reader references a lot of popular literature and popular culture, I mean, from Boys in the Hood, the film not too long ago, and Catcher in the Rye, Portnoy's Complaint.
Right.
Your examples are so refreshing because they are things that you don't have to be a psychiatrist, you don't have to be a therapist, or be even involved in professional care and treatment to respond to. I mean, I found myself, yeah, that makes sense, you know.
I never thought of that.
Yeah, but it does seem to be a relatively straightforward effort on your part to make these convincing arguments. How would you, talking to a viewer who perhaps hasn't had a chance to read the book, or may not get that chance, what kinds of initial advice or what guidelines or watchwords would you give them?
I'm not sure I understand the
Well,
question.
I'm thinking if you were to give us 2 or 3 key guides, phrases, words that in the case of myself, a father, should be concerned about or looking about in terms of raising his sons, what would those be? How?
Well, I think to begin with that for men, for fathers, you need to examine for yourself whether you want to pass on the legacy of the kind of growing up with the kind of definition of being a male, that you would want the same thing for your son.
This is a value system.
That you have to examine your value system and think about what would have helped you in your life, and maybe to not interfere when your wife has other ideas about her son or your son together. So often the father is sort of designated as the bearer of the male image, and that's why we talk so much about the male role model, so that the father has the job of training the boy how to be a man. But that man is the definition that you grew up with, not what we would hope to think of as the new man or the changed man or a human being. That we ought to be raising human beings, not men, not women.
So this role model, and we read a lot today about mentoring programs, that mentor or role model need not be the same sex.
Right.
Are there, I think you would have difficulty convincing some women that that's important.
Oh, I think women have been very collusive in this process. I mean, I'm not, and I myself at one point in my life, yes, I think that it would be hard to convince a lot of women, as well as a lot of men.
Initial responses in your practice, for instance, when you would recommend this, or you would try to guide a couple towards this?
In my work, it has been miraculous in terms of people saying, thank God. Even adolescent boys. I mean, I've just seen a African-American mother and son, and she's very worried about the boy, though I think he's a pretty good kid, but he's part of a gang, and she's concerned about him, and he didn't want to come, and he told me right off he wasn't going to talk. But little by little, he warmed up. Finally, I said to him, Joey, how do you hide the tender part of yourself? And he looked, he had been looking down with his cap down, like he looked up, he looked me right in the eye. And he thought for a minute, and then he said, I act tough. So I said to him, well, does that mean that the stronger the tender feelings are, the tougher you have to be? And he said, yes. So I said, well, I want you to think about that, you know? So even an adolescent boy who you think of as being inaccessible to those, that he doesn't have those feelings, you can access them.
You can find them. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And when you do, you change I mean, I think it's like changing that kid's life.
Mm-hmm.
That he knows, and he can, and then the whole therapy shifts. His mother starts telling me that he shows those tender feelings with his little niece, and they begin to talk rather about his tender feelings than about the trouble he gets into. And he tells me what he likes about girls, and I mean the whole thing shifts and changes.
It seems that the goal, if you will, of raising good men is to make some major societal changes. Not just how individuals live their lives, but collectively how we might face a fairly uncertain future.
Well, I hate to be that grandiose. See, I think On the other hand, when I watch the morning news and I look at the degree of violence, 99% male in the world, not just here, I get scared to death.
Do you extrapolate this then to the kind of global conflicts, wars in the former
Well,
Yugoslavia, the
yeah.
strife in South Africa?
Yeah, two patriarchal systems as a whole in which competition and aggression and are major forces of I'm better than you are, I'm bigger than you are, I know more than you, I have a bigger gun, you know, and so on. Sure.
You
But
mentioned...
am I saying that this book is going to change the world? No. No.
Well,
I have some hope.
every explosion needs a spark, and
Well,
maybe that's what you're furnishing here.
well, if I'm furnishing and given the slight, then, I mean, then I would be very happy. But I don't know whether it's been a long, hard process that the world is where it is. But, so I don't know. I'm not that hopeful.
When you go from the younger child, and you gave us just the example of the adolescent, are there particular critical points in their own physical and psychological development where these ideas, if they intersect at those critical points? Is there something that I have a 14-year-old and he seems to be a great kid, but maybe he's not, and maybe it's too late. But how about this 6-year-old that I have? Does any of this correlate with age?
I think there's an age for every child of pulling back a little bit. I said my 2.5-year-old granddaughter shocked her mother, who said to her the other day, said to Laura said to her, "You want to cuddle?" They were sitting, and she said, "No, I want my privacy." Which Laura said
at 2.5.
At 2.5. So but there is an age where every child begins to feel itself as separate and wants that separation, and I think we need to respect that. But that's a back and forth where it also wants the connection, where the child wants very much the connection with its parents. And if, when a boy is 6, we permit the connection with the father, which is they play ball together, they go to the ball game, and he coaches Little League, whatever, and we encourage that connection, which we do in this, but discourage the connection with his mother. By, well, that's not what he shouldn't be doing this with, he should be with his father. No, after all, he's 6. Then we're, I think, depriving him of a tremendous resource and a tremendous sense of connectedness to a person who is very essential in his life.
Well, maybe that raises the issue of, I mean, is there a flip side to this coin? And given my 2 daughters, is there something to be said for providing them a little more independence than what perhaps culturally they've been used to?
Yeah, I think there certainly is, but I think we're already doing that. Most certainly. And
that's because of our
of
the
whole
role
family.
of women in
exactly
in
is
this
shifting, and their mothers are working, and they take your daughters to work programs and the whole, you know, and so that is already there in the culture now. It'll take time for that as well, but the flip side of that is leave the boys alone. Don't change anything. Because the male ego is very fragile, and we protect it, and women have been trained to protect it. And I think that's the piece that has to change now.
Well, if the change is going to occur, this will take an enormous amount of convincing, I would think, some education on the part of parenting.
Well, I think that women are ready to shift the perception of what they want.
So the collusion that you mentioned earlier, you see this waning, or there's a good opportunity?
I think that as the women's movement and women in general are feeling more better about themselves, if they can begin to truly appreciate those qualities that have been defined as feminine, truly appreciate them as good things, not just to impart to our daughters or to, we cannot, if we will not be able to, and I say we inclusively women, will not be able to deprive their sons. But first comes that shift that these qualities are worthwhile.
Right. Beyond the field of family therapy and beyond psychiatry, are there other professionals who need to embrace and...
Absolutely. The popular culture to begin with. I mean, I look at a movie like Home Alone, the great hero tale of the little 8-year-old who can conquer the world, live by himself, doesn't need anybody, right? Man of the house, totally capable, totally, as a terror story for little boys, a scare story for their mothers and for their sons. Terrifying notion that you can be abandoned by the people who are your caretakers, but you're supposed to be able to, if you're 8 years old and you're a male, you're supposed to be able to survive. I think kids run screaming in terror. They have nightmares for... Nobody has said so. It's been thought of as pure fun, right? And I see them. I mean, people call me and say, I don't know what's going on here. My 8-year-old son has been waking up at night and coming into our bedroom. He hasn't done that for years. And I say to them, has he seen Home Alone?
Invariably, yes.
Yes. Could that be it? That sure could. Sure could.
Any bright spots then in the popular culture? Have you seen any?
I haven't.
Any movies or books that?
I haven't, but I would sure like to begin to see a different emphasis on what it means to be male, instead of the sort of lecherous, I don't even know how to describe what the image, the current image, at least in the 50s, you know, where you had the father knows best. It was a good man who was your sort of role model, and he always knew best, and he was kindly, and he was good to the children, and that was sort of in the 90s, the men are either idiots on television, bumbling idiots, or lecherous fools.
Yeah.
And that is really pathetic. I mean, what are we doing to our boys?
Well, in that we have a call to action, and I think in terms of the spark that you may ignite here, The Courage to Raise Good Men is a phenomenal book. As a father of 2 young boys, I've been blessed with the chance to read it.
Thank you, Jim. That moves me.
Thank you, Olga, for sharing the ideas, and thank you, audience, for being with us. Our discussion with Olga Silverstein, the author of A Courage to Raise Good Men.
A presentation of the Hennepin County Library.